Welcome to the ST&G Green Knee presentation. As you can see, we have a variety of knees that fall into the green knee family. Let's briefly go over how we define build height, just so you know. This is basically industry standard, and it's to correlate to where the knee takes up space within the prosthesis. So, for example, at the top, if there's a pyramid female receiver, it's going to be where it contacts the knee ball where the pyramid is. And basically, it's usually mid ball. On the bottom of the knee, it's going to be the top of the tube at full insertion in the tube clamp of the knee frame. Let's start with the L1311A. It is a weight activated brake knee, but it also has a manual lock feature. So the purpose of this knee is for the rehabilitation phase, to go from a locking knee to a brake activated knee with a manual lock disabled. This is a single axis. It's very sensitive when adjusted properly. So you can adjust it as the patient progresses. There's also a extension spring assist, and you can adjust for friction as well. And this is comparable to other knees on the market. The biggest difference being that ours is PDAC approved, and we do have the PDAC letter, and it is of a billet material. It is not cast, so the durability is higher than some of the comparable knees out there. The alignment for this knee, it's a single axis knee, and if you look, you can see where the weight line of the socket is versus the knee center, and the knee center should be 10 millimeters posterior to the weight line. And as usual, we do have alignment schematics for every knee that we provide. We also recommend that you have a built-in safety factor of 3 millimeters. Just add a little spacer when you do your bench alignment. And when you go to stand them for the first time, what happens is as you take that little piece of foam out, it will cause the knee to go into extension and lock it in extension. So when they stand, the knee doesn't just buckle. And this is good practice to do anyway. Now, if we look at some of the adjustments on the L1311A, we have the brake sensitivity, which is on the face of the knee as you flex it. So if you turn the screw counterclockwise, it will require less weight to activate the brake mechanism. But you do not want to overly adjust this either, because it'll get to the point where you cannot flex the knee, because as you're flexing the knee, you're actually activating the brake mechanism. So within reason, you want to make these adjustments. And conversely, if you turn it clockwise, it's going to require more weight to activate the brake mechanism. So depending on how you adjust this, you want to follow up with the patient regardless to make sure that the adjustment is correct. There's a friction adjustment as well. And if you look at the picture on the upper right, you can see how this adjustment screw is the bottom screw. As you turn it counterclockwise, you're going to reduce the friction. And as you turn it clockwise, you're going to add more friction. And again, you don't want to overly adjust this. You want to make very tiny, minor adjustments as you go, because 3 degrees of turn in this adjustment will make a huge difference. There's also a spring extension assist. You'll need to remove the pylon and simply turn the screw clockwise or counterclockwise. Clockwise, you're going to compress the spring more and get more extension assist. If you turn the screw counterclockwise, you're going to reduce the spring tension and you'll have less extension assist. So you don't want to do just one or the other. You want to adjust both in coordination of how the knee is working. With most of our manual locking knees, if there's a lock lever, then most likely there is also some set screws to manually disable the lock. And then that way they can progress from a locking knee to a regular functioning knee. In this case with the L1311A, it'll be a weight activated brake knee. When you disable the lock mechanism and they no longer need it, it's always good practice to go ahead and remove the lanyard. And so if you look at the picture, you can see the screw A, and this is pretty much the case for all of our locking knees. There's a little screw that retains the lanyard on the lock lever. You can simply turn the screw B with the lever in the unlock position, tighten it to hold the lever up, and then remove that screw A and remove the lanyard. Then that way there's less to catch. So let's go over some alignment figures. We have alignment suggestions for all of our knees. And if you look at this particular knee, the 1323 knee, it's a pneumatic 5-bar knee with stance flexion, we have the recommendation for the alignment. Based off of the weight line from the socket, on the 4-bar knees, we always reference the upper anterior axis. So this will be the knee center of the knees on the 4-bar knees. The weight line will go through that axis and then down to the foot. So depending on the foot, you're going to need to accommodate the alignment of that foot. Now, if you have a foot that the weight line is very unstandard, then you may need to have an offset adapter to accommodate that foot. Because if you tilt the knee too much in one direction or the other, it can make the knee overly stable or unstable, depending on the instant center of rotation, indicated by that red dot in the diagram where it says IKC. That's the instant knee center. So depending on the 4-bar, your IKC, that instant knee center, is going to vary. And when you have stance flexion, like our 5-bar knees, it's also going to vary depending on how much compression they get in that stance flexion mechanism. So here we have L1321. It's our simple 4-bar manual locking knee. This is a K2 level knee. There is different mounts available for all of our green knees that have interchangeable mounts. This is notable if you look and see there will be a mounting bolt. If there's a mounting bolt for the mount, then you can most likely interchange a lotus adapter or a male pyramid. This one has manual lock. You can also disable the manual lock. There's friction adjustment and there's a spring extension assist. The mounts, because they are interchangeable, also allow for AP slide, ML slide, and rotation. And then we have the L1324. Again, this is a manual locking knee, but with the offer of stance flexion. So if you have a patient that you know will progress, it's nice to offer a 5-bar knee that has manual lock, because then they can use the stance flexion, even though the knee is locked, to ambulate. And what that will do is absorb some of the impact and also allow them to negotiate some obstacles because of the stance flexion range of motion. And then as they progress, you can go ahead and disable the manual lock mechanism. And then you'll need to adjust the knee accordingly depending on their activity. And this knee also does have PDAC approval. (1326). This is again a low activity knee up to K2. Does not have a manual lock. Surprisingly, as small and compact and light as it is, it does have a very high stable instant knee center location. And this one does have lotus adapter or pyramid mount. 1321, this is the non-locking version of the 4-bar knee. Again, it has a lotus adapter or pyramid mount adjustment, interchangeable. So you can adjust the slide or rotation as needed. K2 rated knee. Again, we do have PDEC approval on this as well. All of our green knees have PDEC approval. 1324, this is the non-locking version, and it has up to 12 degrees of stance flexion, just like the L1324. And most of our 5-bar stance flexion knees have about 12 degrees of stance flexion range. There's friction adjustment, spring extension assist adjustment. You can adjust the stance flexion. Well, we do not recommend that you loosen it and make it more loose because that will induce some issues that we discovered. And this, again, it's a K2 to mid K3, depending on the patient. It's a mechanical knee. So let's go over stance flexion. Specifically on our knee, this is how the stance flexion works. And the nice thing about the stance flexion is it induces mechanical lock stability. And what that means is, if you look at the picture on the right, if there's no stance flexion, this will allow the 4-bar knee mechanism built into the knee to easily go into swing as they walk. Also, if they're going down an obstacle, it could have the knee go into trigger as any 4-bar knee. So as they go into more stance flexion and they go, say, for example, in this middle picture, we have 5 degrees. You can see where the intersecting lines representing the instant knee center, it's going up and more posterior, because what's happening is it's allowing that 4-bar mechanism above the stance flexion feature to rock and tilt back. And that is inducing more of a stable instant knee center. Because if you look at the intersecting lines from right to left, you can see how it's progressively going up higher and more posterior. So as we have 10 degrees of stance flexion, you can see how it's very high and very far posterior versus the knee. So this is why you do not want to overly loosen the stance flexion feature, because if you can do this easily with the prosthesis in a static mode, not with the patient in it, and you're manipulating the prosthesis and you can see full range of stance flexion, it's going to be too loose. And you'll see in a video later on what our recommendation is for the range of adjustment on this. L1322. This is one of the green knees that does not have interchangeable knee mounts. It has a fixed pyramid mount. And this is partly because where the mount would be for the bolt, you have a locking mechanism. And this is intended to lock in full extension. So this is a pneumatic knee. It's a 4-bar pneumatic knee with a manual lock feature. And why would you have this manual lock feature? Well, it was actually driven more by customers requesting this type of knee. And we found that their recommendation was because we have active patients, sometimes they get in positions for their work or leisure where they want to have some stability while they're standing or maneuvering in tight confines. So they can easily go ahead and lock the knee in full extension and go about whatever activity they need to do. And they know that it's locked. And then once they're done with that activity, they can go ahead and unlock it and it'll function normally as a 4-bar pneumatic knee. So this has been driven by customer requests. 1322. This is the version of the knee without the manual lock. And since it does not have the manual lock, it is interchangeable with a pyramid or a lotus adapter. And with all of our pneumatic knees, there are separate extension and flexion pneumatic adjustments. And you really want to go over the instructions to see how to adjust these, because unlike a hydraulic knee, pneumatic knees require overly adjusting that adjustment. But you also want to adjust them in harmony, not just one or the other. You need to adjust them both in order to get that particular feature that you're trying to gain out of the pneumatic cylinder. And we also have a video available as well online. And you can go to our website and navigate to the videos. And it clearly shows how the knee will respond to that particular adjustment and what the patient is feeling. So it's important to ask your patient when you do these adjustments what they're feeling. And then that way you know what you need to adjust. So let's go ahead and look at the 1323. This is the pneumatic version of the 1324. The stance flexion feature is the same. Lower bar mechanism is the same. And the stance flexion feature is adjusted by screws that are on the anterior surface of the knee. And we'll go over that later in the PowerPoint. So let's look at the stance flexion feature. There are two screws on the anterior face of the knee, whether it be the mechanical knee or the pneumatic knee. And what we want to do is look at the amount of screws showing. We want 1.5 threads showing, and that is maximum. If you have more than 1.5 threads showing, what's going to happen is the stance flexion feature is going to be too loose. You're going to have excessive, easy stance flexion, and we do not want that. What happens is, because that stance flexion influences the upper forebar mechanism, if you overly adjust this too loose, it will induce too much stability of the knee and will make it difficult for the patient to actually initiate swing while walking. And also, it will make noise. This video shows how, when they're walking, if it's properly adjusted, you will not hear a clicking or popping. So you can see there's no clicking or popping occurring while it's flexing. Now, when it's loose, you can hear it popping. Stance flexion is a little loose. So you want to make sure that you have about 1.5 or less threads showing. Now, if you really loosen this, it will make a loud pop and it will really lock out the knee. And you can see how it increases the noise. It's very loud. It shouldn't be too easy to go into maximum stance flexion. And there's no popping. So look at this one. You can see how it's easily going into maximum stance flexion, and that's way too loose. So when you have this feature too loose, what also happens, you can see and hear how there's a very loud pop. And the socket amplifies the noise. So if you look at this, you can see that the threads are way loose. Now, no fault of the practitioner. When we initially sold the knee, we felt, oh yeah, you can go ahead and loosen this and make it really active. But then we found out that it was not the case. It actually induces inherent problems. So here, the stance flexion feature will actually lock out the knee. We thought it was a head tilt, but in looking at more of the pictures, we found that it wasn't the head tilt. It was actually the stance flexion feature was too loose. So the stance flexion is going easily into the max, and you can hear the popping. But some of the rattle is attributed to the lanyard bouncing off the knee. So if you properly adjust this stance flexion feature, 1.5 threads or less, then the stance flexion should function normally. You do want to make sure that you ask the patient what they're feeling, because what they're going to feel is different than what you're going to see. The knee mount bolt, when you take the knee out of the box, is not torqued or Loctited. It is simply there and placed so that you can mount the knee and do your alignment that you need to do. It's basically the size of a foot bolt wrench, and you want to make sure that you lock tight the threads and torque it down accordingly. So after you get your alignment, remove the screw after you mark where the mount should be. If you have a Lotus adapter, make sure you mark all the faces so that they line up and mark the location of where it should be placed. Apply your Loctite and torque it accordingly. For the pyramid, same thing, mark where it should be. Take the bolt off, apply your Loctite, torque it accordingly. After you're done torquing the pyramid adapter, make sure you then tighten down the rotation set screw. One of the things you should not do is modify any knee. No matter what manufacturer it is, do not modify the knee. This is modifying the knee. We do not sell this mount for our knees. This is from a different manufacturer. When you do this, you void the warranty because you're modifying the knee. You're making it to work as it was not designed to do. This particular knee mount will actually cause the knee to become unstable. So this knee is a 1324, and what had happened was we got a call that the patient fell and broke the bolt and broke the knee mount. Now, if you look and see the picture on the left, the stance flexion feature on this knee that has stance flexion built into the design of the knee frame was canceled out. So then it works like a regular 4-bar knee. Now we talked about the instant knee center, where the knee will rotate on a 4-bar knee and where it's fixed. Depending on where the weight line is, if it's aligned properly, it will be stable. Now, when they're going into heel strike, initial contact, if you put this feature on this knee, like on the right, this pivoting knee mount, what's going to happen when they load the knee, when they load the prosthesis at heel strike, at initial contact? Well, it's going to load the bumper, which is going to allow the socket to then flex on top of your prosthesis, which is then going to get that socket closer to the instant knee center. And what's that going to do? It's going to make the prosthesis unstable overly quickly. And what's going to happen? They're going to be subject to falling. So this voided the warranty. After we saw the pictures, we told them that no, we do not warrant this modification of the knee. You guys are responsible for inducing an unsafe part that you modified onto somebody's prosthesis, and you canceled out the safety feature, which is the stance flexion. So if you modify it, do not expect us to warranty it. That's your modification. Disabling the lock mechanism. Now the L1311A and our other manual locking knees, you can disable the lock mechanism. Simply get the lock lever, push it up, get the lock set screw, and screw it all the way in to hold the lever up. And in some cases, like the green knees, the 4-bar knees, there are actually 2 set screws in when you want to do both of them. On the L1311A, I believe there's 1. You want to go ahead and set that one. Now, after you set the 2 set screws, you want to undo the lanyard screw that holds the lanyard onto the lever, and then you can remove the lanyard from the prosthesis. Head tilt adjusting screw. Now, the head tilt adjusting screw is there to fine-tune the function of the knee. It's not there to allow for more flexion or extension of the socket on the knee. That's not what it is intended to do. This is intended to allow, once you have the alignment properly set, if the patient states, oh, it's a little difficult to initiate knee flexion, then you can fine-tune it with the head tilt feature. And this can really upset the knee, but you do not want to do this on any of the locking knees, because once you adjust the head tilt on the locking knee, the lock mechanism might not work. Once I screw this in, it's going to move the head tilt and it's going to interfere with the lock lever. Once I release it, you can see how it doesn't go down. It should freely move and engage and lock. But you also do not want any play. If you adjust it the other way, it can make it move, and there could be some motion at the knee, even though the knee is locked. And that is not good either, because then it will overstress the lock lever. It should be adjusted to where there's no motion in any flexion or extension range of the knee with the lever in the lock position. Now, if we look at the head tilt adjustment, just to get a clearer picture, and this is an instruction, so it's wise to retain and read the instructions. If you look at the middle picture, this is the neutral position of the instant center of rotation, IKC of the knee. And if we look, it's at a fixed position. Now, as we go to the right, if you turn it clockwise, you're going to induce more instability. It's going to be less stable. And so what happens is it causes the head of the knee to tilt up. And that's going to make the instant center of rotation come down and more anterior. And we talked about where it should be. It should be high and posterior. So as it comes more anterior and down, it's going to make it more unstable. Now, if we look at the picture on the extreme left, if you turn it counterclockwise, it's going to make that head tilt down at the front, top of the knee. And what that's going to do is it's going to induce more stability. So overly adjusting these, you can see how the instant center of rotation goes up or down depending on how you adjust it. So if you're not sure, read the instructions. It tells you exactly how to adjust it, and you should only adjust this to induce 1 to 2 degrees change only. All our knees have an extension assist spring. You can adjust it by the adjustment screw, but you need to check and see if there's a set screw for the adjustment screw. If there is a set screw for the adjustment screw, make sure that you loosen it prior to adjustment. If you don't, what will happen is you will gall the screw. If you gall the screw and you do an adjustment, it's going to then go ahead and gall up the knee frame. And if it galls up the knee frame, it basically voids the warranty. So you need to be careful when you do this adjustment and make sure and check for any set screws. Just get in the habit of checking for a set screw, because most of the screws on any knee has a set screw. So if we look at the swing friction adjustment, our green knees have a friction adjustment just like the L1311A does, and we went over that swing friction adjustment. If we look at the picture on the right, that is the 1326, the smaller low profile knee, and that one has the friction adjustment just above the rotation pin. And so basically what these are doing is they're trying to induce a clamping force around the pivot so that you have friction. So look and see close to most of where the pivots are, and that's the screw you want to adjust. So the L1321 or the 1321, the adjustment screw is close to the pivot. If you look at the L1324, again, it's close to the pivot, and there's 2 adjustment screws. If you look at the 1324, you can see that the friction adjustment is at the head of the knee. And so you want to look and see. Sometimes it's on the link. Most of the time it is. Sometimes it's on the head. Depends on the knee. So the biggest difference is going to be the 1324 and the L1324. They look very similar. You would think the friction adjustment would be in the same location, but because one has a locking lever on the head of the knee, you cannot put the friction adjustment screw there. So that's where they're going to vary. And please check us out. If you have any further needs, you can go to our website, stngco.com. Thank you very much.